Hey, everybody. It's Ethan Evans, the Easy Coach. I'm here with Mrugendra. Mrugendra is our guest tonight, as he's been before, following up on his coaching from about a month ago. And we're excited to have him here. And he's asked some good, hard questions tonight. So, a few notes on how the broadcast works. A lot of you know this, and I'll probably mention it again as more people show up. But on nights where we're doing live coaching, hey there, Chalupa Whale. Good to see you. You got your blue shirts out. I love it. Yeah, I wore blue too. Probably been running around, so I should act more dignified and close this button. There we go. Hey, Pete. All right. So anyway, when we're doing live coaching, we don't have the question widget active, so no need to put in questions tonight. But instead, Mugendra's asked us a couple good ones. We're going to follow up on his homework. And if you do have comments, we welcome those. Drop them in chat. Feel free to agree with my advice, disagree with my advice, add to my advice, or ask follow on questions. Mugendra has let me know since he's in India and he has a meeting in an hour sharp at the end of this. We'll be ending right on time. And so we're going to jump right in. And the first thing we're going to talk about is last time when Mrugendra was with us, we were talking about a number of things, but he agreed he would try and test taking a customer-centric approach in one project. And so take it away and tell us what happened.
Yeah. So I tried going sort of customer backwards in the sense trying to put on the board or writing down what it is that we see our product solving from a customer pain points perspective 12 months down the line when we actually are in market and we have X customers who are using it. Like, what is it that we want them to think about us? What is it that we want them to say in terms of how our products are helping them solve some of their pain points? What pain points do they think we have solved, etc., etc. The first point was this was extremely hard to do because one of the key contributors who had to do this was a medical professional, and getting them to think in this fashion was a big challenge in itself as to how do you educate or how do you essentially coach somebody who is coming from a medical profession to write things down in this fashion without being prescriptive about what they are doing or what the product needs to do, but focus more on this is what we would want a customer to essentially believe or talk about us. So there was one challenge there, and it took multiple iterations of convincing and working with them to elicit the information out. But we managed to do some of it. And it's still a work in progress. I don't think we have gotten there yet in terms of being good at it. But we made a start. There is
I'm
still
going
a
to
little
interrupt
bit.
you one sec. Just pause your story. I
Sure.
realize I didn't bother to explain what you do. And so, just real quickly, I've popped up the website for where Mugendra works. He's at Exact Systems, which is medical education, is the simplest summary. And he took a problem in that space for what he's describing. So, I just want to give people context. And as you'll see in the rest of the evening, he's basically leading what your official title is chief strategy officer,
It's chief product officer.
chief product officer. Sorry. So as chief product officer, he's heading up most of the efforts in this office and directing the product efforts. And we're going to talk about some of that. He has one peer there and then offshore management in New Jersey. So we're going to talk, though, a little bit about those problems. And I interrupted him, which I apologize for. But I realized a lot of the people watching may have no idea the context. So I just wanted to set that because that's the context. Please go back to your story.
Yeah. So what I was saying is I don't think we are there yet, but we made a start. There is still a little bit of uncertainty about what is this all about? Why are we doing this? But I think that's where I'm just going to go back on a principle that persistence will pay off and stick to it. The other thing which I think was easier to do was to say that
Uh-oh. I froze him somehow. That was me.
one of the things that I was able to drive alignment from a customer backward standpoint was to say that we have a user conference upcoming where about 200 of our customers will be participating. Uh, this is coming up in about 3 weeks from now. So we are going to actually be aligned that for a lot of our new releases going forward, we are going to drive usability labs and do usability testing in some of these forums so that we are able to get actual customer feedback from not just a few customers who the sales team is able to reach out to, but essentially a group of mass customers in a more easier to engage forum. So we are going to do a bunch of that, and there was alignment to drive that. I've also been able to align one or two people and get them to buy into the idea. A couple of my directs who are more bought into the idea than others. So the the hope is to have them champion this going forward.
Excellent. Well, that sounds good. So, overall, you'd say, I think what you would say, if I'm just translating, the experiment is in progress but showing promising signs so far. Like, that's what I heard.
I would say it's showing promising signs from the people who have experience or who understand technology.
Okay.
Even the space we are in is unique in the sense that a lot of the domain experts or subject matter experts are not inherently technical in nature and come from a medicine, have been medical practitioners for several years in the past. Getting buy-in from them, like I was saying, is probably going to be much harder, and just a case of being persistent with it, and maybe even sort of building a little thicker skin.
Yeah. I believe that. And but the good thing is you have some people who are bought in, so it's not just you talking about it. And I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sweet. Well, we might talk more about your experiment later, but I think, unless you want input on it, is there, from what you've said, I think if it's running and you're doing it, we set it up as test it and try and get a success in one area. You're working through that. I think you just have to stay the course to get that example of the process working. So I would continue as it is.
Yeah, I think the challenge, again, I'm saying this for the third time probably, but the challenge is getting the non-technical people on board. But I wouldn't expect that to happen this soon. I think the goal would be to more get them aligned probably 3 months down the line versus 3 or 4 weeks down the line, which is where we are right now.
Well, so it is worth knowing because this relates somewhat to your questions about cultural change, the one you said you wanted to talk about this time. Are you getting active opposition from the people on your team? The medical professionals, would you say they're like pushing back or just kind of like, well, I'm not too sure? Like, where would you put them on the spectrum of, I get they're not bought in, but where are they on the spectrum of skepticism?
It really varies individual to individual. There are individuals who are more open and who are, I would say, have skepticism versus resistance, and then there are individuals who are, hey, I know what I'm doing. I am the nurse, or I'm the doctor, or I'm the physiotherapist. You are not, so I know better.
Yeah, that makes sense because they're used to being the experts. And one thing that's hard for people, do you remember, have you ever seen a model called situational leadership? Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, yeah, I've heard of it.
Okay, so it's by a guy named Ken Blanchard, who I quote sometimes here on the show. But the thing about situational leadership is it says people can be an expert in one skill and a beginner in another. And you're dealing with people who are experts in their medical fields. And they may also be experts in how to educate about those medical fields. And the thing that makes that difficult is it's hard for people who are used to being the expert to accept that in another area they may need to be the student or that they have things to learn. Um, and so that can be like, unfortunately, when you first came on the show, I think I told this story of you running into the woman who was upset because nobody liked her dress. And while this isn't exactly comparable, there is the emotional journey of I'm an expert, I'm a respected expert in my field, I'm a respected expert in teaching the field, but actually when it comes to building scaled technical products, I may be a complete novice. And that can be really hard psychological. Hello, Faroki. It can be really hard psychologically for people to accept that. And so I think the coaching I would give you is realize that you're asking people who are used to being high performing experts to accept the role a little bit of being learners of a new process. And I might try to get them to see it a bit. Ethernight, hey, good to see you. All the regulars are here now. We've got the crew. We need Hephaestus and a couple others, and everyone. It's like Avengers Assemble, which I love. Anyway, I think you might try and compare it to a medical trial. Like we're trying something new for here. We have good reason to believe this will help the patient, us, our company. But like I need you to buy in and take the medicine. Something like that. You can present it however you want, but it seems that way to me. Hey, Dorino. I don't want to. Since you ask really good questions, I won't. We'll get another follow up on your homework next time. So, for those of you who follow me on LinkedIn or who saw the blog post, Mrugendra had two key questions. Are those still the two things you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, it's your time. So, but his hardest question, I thought, was Mrugendra is in a situation where, as I put it, I quoted, because I'm old and because I love history, a Harry Truman quote, which is Harry Truman, president, said, the buck stops here. And what that meant was not, sometimes buck means dollar, but it's also bucking things up the chain of command, like not being willing to make a decision. And since he was president, he said, well, it obviously stops with me. Like there's no one else I can appeal this to. I have to make the decision. And that's a little bit the situation you're in. And so that's what I titled this session, The Buck Stops Here. And hey, chat, you always, whenever you're with me, you get a free history lesson, whether you paid for it or not. And so you can count on that. That can be like a new channel meme. What's the history lesson of the night? But the first thing I want to ask is, you said, how do you get your decisions validated? Like when there's no one above you, there's no one that you can check your product direction with. How do you get them validated? I have a bunch of thoughts on that, and I'll share them. But one of my development areas. Hey, the real Mars Bar. Thank you for the raid. Love to see you here. Appreciate you coming in. That's really great. And welcome to your viewers. Very generous of you to come in. So we're here talking with Mrugendra. A lot of people have joined. No, you're not interrupting at all. A lot of people have joined. Tonight we're live coaching Mrugendra, who's an executive with Exact Systems out of India. And we're following up on stuff we talked about before. And he's asked the hard question, when you're the top of the chain of command, how do you know if your decisions are right and get them validated? And my question to you, since I need to work on asking questions rather than just telling, is what are you already doing? Because then I'll do all the telling. But I'd love to know like what you're trying or what you've thought about.
Yeah, so I think so far I have been in more of a learning phase where a lot of the core product decisions of strategically what do we get into and what do we not get into, I'm just happy more delegating to the CEO and the chief operating officer who have more insight, and I'm just literally going. I'm literally when there is any conflict, I'm the first guy who steps back. and say and goes, listen, I don't know about it yet as much as you guys do, so I'm just going to trust your judgment and do what you are saying. But I don't see that phase continuing for too long. I mean, I would have failed at my job if that phase continues for anything beyond another month or two, by which time I would be 6 months into this job, right? So at this point in time, a lot of the strategic directional decisions of what we build, how do we spend the funds we have, where do we put our money on, is something I'm delegating, or delegating is the wrong word, but I'm trusting the judgment of
You're
either a
deferring. You're deferring to the other
or
leaders.
my boss,
Yeah.
right? And but a lot of other decisions around how to organize the team, how to build the right structure, who does what kind of processes to set up to be agile in our development process, etc., are largely at this point in time my decisions that I get to run by people and get their inputs. And there are three people I can run this by in the company right now. So I do run it by them and get their inputs, and think through those inputs and take what is valid, and choose not to take what I believe is not valid. The typical process, right? I run them with some of my advisors on the board. Like I was saying, there are a couple of board advisors we have who I have a lot of respect for. So I run it by them when it is key. But that's about it. Those are the main mechanisms I have right now to figure out if I'm doing the right thing or I'm not doing the right thing.
Okay. Well, good news. If this was, what's that old show, Family Feud? If this was Family Feud, you would have hit the number one answer. Like the most people vote for this answer, and that would be ask your peers, which is your other key people in the company, and ask your advisors. So you're doing that. So I have 5 things, just like Family Feud would. For those of you who are old enough to know it, and everybody else can Google it to find out what the hell the old guy's talking about. But that's okay. Um, Advisors is thing one. There's 4 other things that I think you can also do. Um, and I'll start with one that isn't the top of my list because it's the funniest and it does set the tone. Uh, it's lonely at the top. Like what you're describing is the problem of being a startup founder or a startup executive. In the end, it comes down, there's a healthy dose of courage. You need to have courage because you've chosen a leadership position, and so it is going to be lonely at the top. And in fact, someone just left Amazon, someone who worked on our team for a long time, and when he went out the door, what he told me is exactly what you're saying, which he said, I'm going back and I'm going to take some time off, but I'm going to found a company. And I'm wondering, Ethan, if I can call you to run things by you because I've been a startup CEO before and there's no one to ask. And you can't talk to your team because you'll freak them out. Like if you have a really bad problem, like, hey, should we cancel this product? Should we sign an immoral deal? Or should we fire some people because we're out of money? You'll freak them out. Like you can't have that discussion. And so you've got to just make the call. And so the second answer on my Family Feud list, I actually have it in position 4. But my second answer is you're going to just have to sometimes deal with being uncomfortable and be courageous and recognize, I hate to say this, that if you're right, you'll be fabulously thought of and brilliant. And if you're wrong, you'll get fired. But that's like the job. That's the job you took. And I'm not trying to be unhelpful by making it sound threatening. What I'm trying to do is say, like, having realization that this is part of the job may help you deal with the fear when you feel it. Because what you're really dealing with is fear of being wrong, I think. Because obviously, if you thought you were right, no problem. Okay, 3 more helpful answers besides knowing that you have to face it. I think you can ask your team under you. You can't ask them scary questions, But Pink Dragons here in chat, one of our moderators, would always say that the way she leads her teams is to bring them into the decision as much as possible. Even if they don't agree, ask them what they think, what concerns them, because they have wisdom about how your company operates today. And so they can at least keep you out of obvious pitfalls for stuff you don't yet know. And so I think bringing your team into the decision is thing number two. Now, you can't bring them into the scary parts, right? You can, in the horrible situation I just said, you can still say, well, we need to get more business, but this deal's a little shady. Do we want to do business with a shady company or not? And how would we do that safely? And you can have that discussion without saying, by the way, if we don't have this contract, 10 of you are going to get laid off because we're out of money, right? Like, you don't have to, you can bring them partway in. Yeah, so Pink Dragon saying always check in with your subject matter experts in chat, which this is one of the few cases I could predict her input because she said it a lot in previous discussions about teams. The next thing I would say is tests and data. Your friend here is anything that allows you to be objective. Because you're worried about being wrong. So the question is, how can you, as often as possible, how can you run some kind of test? How can you try something? Drino says, including the team in decision making, including the team in decision making makes it way easier to implement the change. I couldn't agree more. Because everyone prefers their own ideas. Let's be fair. So they want to know if it's their own, like if they feel like they have ownership of the idea, then they have ownership of the outcome. But my point is, as chief product officer and the decision maker, your one anchor of truth can be objective data. If you can get data of some kind, then it's no longer a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact. And so I would always be asking myself, where can I get data? And if you don't have data, the second related thing I would ask myself is, how can I test this? What is my way to test this to get information? Like, do I have to just make a huge leap of faith? See, we got Mrugendra up too early. It's 8:30 in India and he needs more coffee, which I understand. So, anyway, I don't know if you recall this from Amazon, but Bezos has this thing he talks about of one-way doors and two-way doors. And a one-way door, you're nodding like you remember. But for everybody else, a one-way door is a decision that once you take it, you're stuck with it. Like, there's no going back. So in my horrible situation I brought up, if you're contemplating that you have to reduce the force at a company and you lay off 10 people, once you do that, they're gone. Like, if you decide tomorrow, oops, you got to go train 10 new people, like, you might be able to staff back up, but those experienced people are gone and your company morale is shot. You may have had to make that. So that's a one-way door. A two-way door is something more like the test you're running with working backwards and being customer focused. You can change that. You can redo it with another team. You can stop it. You can start it. You can pause it. So bottom line is, I don't know for how many of your decisions are testable, but that's what I would think about. Let's see what else chat has. Chat's added in. Furoki feels that Dorino's point was that the team has more knowledge about implementation details. It's definitely both, right? When I said trust your team, I realize you're trying to make changes, but still involving your team in those changes not only increases their buy-in, but also gets you a better plan, particularly when you're the outsider coming in. In the end, a leader, Adrena, it's both. When you're a leader coming in, being too much of an autocrat, particularly from what I saw when I worked in India with you and with others, my sense of the culture is being too directive, um, maybe accepted on the surface. People will salute and say, yes, sir. But undercurrent, they like, my experience is they like more consensus. So I don't know. You're the expert, though, more than me. Is that right? Uh oh, you've muted yourself.
I
There you go.
think I think the general way is it's basically a lot of heads that nod, but they may not be committed necessarily to it in the background.
Well, this
Uh,
is this is
quite,
this, right? Like this
yeah,
is the
it's better. It's now more this than what it was 5 or 7 years ago. It's
okay.
become change. But this doesn't always mean a vehement yes, I'm going to do it.
yeah.
It could be, yeah, I'm saying yes because I don't want to stand up and raise my hand and be the bad guy in the room who's pushing back. Uh, in the background, it may not actually mean yes.
Yeah, so for everybody in chat, this is actually a great lesson. Leading around the world, uh, different cultures have different levels of comfort with giving feedback on a decision. And India might be a little bit in the middle. And, Mrugendra is pointing out that the culture is shifting over time to become more what we would see here in the US of more willing to give honest feedback. When I first began, again, making fun of my age, my first employee in the US from India, when I walked into his cube, he stood up 100% of the time, like bolt upright, like military. And, if I sat down, he'd remain standing. And only, like, he would maybe sit down if I told him, like, sit down. But it just wasn't appropriate to sit in my presence. And so, like, he obviously uh, I could have told him to write a paper defending how the moon was made of green cheese, and he'd have gotten started on it because that was orders. So it's just different culture. And so Mugendra is dealing with a culture where just because no one in the room says no or says that's a bad idea, sir, doesn't mean that they're transparent. Yeah, Pete, I've had trouble because I'm too tall. I had in that same company, I one day was wearing cowboy boots. I'm 6'2", and I was wearing cowboy boots, and I was towering over a manager and making him uncomfortable. And he was my manager, but I was still making him uncomfortable. And someone later said, Ethan, don't you know that like the reason to wear boots is because they make you taller, and you don't need that. So lesson learned. I don't wear boots much anymore. Um, anyway, Mugendra, I don't mean to get off the topic. The point is try and involve your team and try and get test data. The last thing I would say um, in how to get your decisions validated is I would consider your retreat plan. In other words, you have to make a decision, you have to go hard, but like, how can you back out of it? What are your options to admit error if something's off course and not lose face? And not that you set yourself up to retreat, but you at least should think through, kind of as a part of that one-way door, two-way door. Look, I'm going to put this decision out there. I'm going to drive it with my team. We're going to work towards it. But what are my tripwires? What are my data? If I can't get data before I start, how can I get data on the way to validate that it's working? Or what data am I going to accept to go, oh shit, this isn't working? And I need to be the big leader. And again, this comes back to what I said about courage. Um, you have to be courageous and say, this plan I've put forward isn't working in this circumstance. And either here's what we're going to do to fix it, or just it's not going to work and we're going to quit. This weekend, I was on Devin's show, and at the end of Devin Nash's show, he was in chat earlier. I don't know if he's still here. At the end of Devin's show, I had to go out and take a phone call, and I was basically apologizing to one of my business partners at another company that we had screwed up. And that's a lousy thing you need to do. To need, and Devin is still here. I can see in the chat bot that he's still logged in. Anyway, I had to go apologize, and that sucks. But sometimes that's part of the leader role. So I think part of what you're going through is just the adaptation of realizing sometimes leaders have to do hard things. They have to make guesses that aren't validated and yet represent them to the team with confidence. And sometimes they have to admit that their decisions were wrong. Now, the good thing is, hey, Quentin, if you admit you're wrong occasionally and you're mostly right, but you admit you're wrong when you are, your team will love you to pieces. If you're wrong all the time, they will correctly assume that you don't know what you're doing. So it's okay not to bat 1,000, right? So those are my 5 pieces of advice. Reviewing them quickly. You nailed the first one. Ask your peers and advisors. Number 2, trust your team and bring them in. Number 3, try to run tests or use data. Number 4, be courageous. Like, it's lonely at the top, and sometimes you just have to make the hard call. And at least knowing that may help you. And number 5, admitting error when it happens. Like, be willing to change course and try and set a tripwire to know the data. So those are my 5 pieces of advice. Do you have questions on any of that? And does Chad have anything to add?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, I think you can do this. I think it. Look, I get it's uncomfortable. You do all the prep you can, and then like starting a startup. And I know your company's a little older than that, but you still view it as a startup. Getting a startup to run well is hard, and there will be mistakes, and not all of them work out. You do all you can, and then the cards fall where they may. Um, and like, to be clear, right? I was in several startups. I worked my ass off. They all basically, like, none of them went under, but they are all still failures. When you and like, it's not because I didn't try hard or the other founders weren't smart. It's hard. You start with the odds against you. All right. So Mrugendra's other question, which I posted on the blog, we'll jump to because he has to end on time here in 30 minutes, 25 more minutes. Yeah, we'll need to turn these snippets of knowledge into Easy Coach merch. Those 5 points. Yeah, we're gonna do that actually. That Chalupa, we're gonna do a special on what I called the magic loop. So we're gonna do that. Anyway, your other question was, how do you drive a culture without too much anxiety? Basically, how do you drive change or lead change in a culture without freaking people out? Is that right? That's the other topic.
Yeah.
Okay. So once again, I want to ask first, like, are you doing that and what are you trying or how do you think about it? And then I have my list of suggestions, but it's always good to know what's on your mind first.
Okay, so I think the way I have been attempting to do it is to not do anything about it for a certain period of time.
Okay.
uh, that I'm more absorbing and I'm more validating that what I understand or what I believe is actually fact based, and I'm able to sort of check it off with not just a single instance but multiple instances that substantiate what my belief or thought is. That's point number one. So I did not do choose to do anything at all for the first 2 to 3 months. Post that, it's been a case of let's first get buy-in, start getting buy-in from the top, and align the CEO, the CTO, and the COO on some of the things that need to change. To say, hey, these are the key things that we need to go do differently, or we need to go drive a change in the culture, in the people, whatever it is, right? End of the day. Uh, and then I have been trying to align my team members to over time to say this is why we need to change how we are doing something, or change the team structure around, change the way we are organized around, change some of the personnel, whatever it is, right? So trying to drive that alignment and keep it more authoritative or top down. The top down or authoritative side of it needs to be to a minimum, unless there is no other option, which probably has happened a couple of times, but not really. I would say it's more like a 70-30 or 80-20, something in that range, where two-thirds is probably, or two-thirds to three-quarters is probably more people at the top are aligned. The person who is going to face the brunt of the change on the ground is aligned, and you're able to then change it. Uh, some of it is just top down,
Okay.
the a quarter or a third, I would say.
Excellent. So once again, you hit some of my ideas. So the first thing I'm going to say, I have a book on this I love, and so I'm going to pop that up real quick. I always have a book, but that's the way it goes. This one's pretty useful. The book is called Switch: How to Change Things When Change is Hard, and it's written by my favorite overall authors, Chip and Dan Heath, um, and it's all about how to lead change. And so this is one of those books. It's super easy to read. It's not very long. As you can see, it's got 4.7 stars out of 5 with 1,000 reviews, uh, and I would say none of those are paid for. And so I would recommend you read this since you're struggling with this, because it's an easy read. And I don't look, I know how busy people are, so I don't recommend books easily. We're gonna have another book in a minute, but I'll come back to it. So, and by the way, for everyone in chat, like, Chip and Dan Heath are awesome. Switch is awesome. It's a partner book to Decisive. It's not as good as Decisive, but it's amazing. So I use it all the time.
I think I've read this. Is this the one which says you have your elephants and uses some analogies like that?
Yes.
I read it 5 or 6 years ago.
Great.
So I can't remember all of it, and maybe I'll reread it. But I do believe they had some analogies about elephants and mentalities that you need to carry with you, and how do you deal with 3 or 4 different mentalities that
Yes.
exist.
It's about the elephant and the rider. And since you've read it, you can probably reread it at twice the speed, but it exactly applies, I think, to at least part of what you're doing. Because in the analogy, the elephant is people's emotions. And the point is, you are kind of the rider in the sense that you can give them reasons and rationality, but it's if they're not emotionally engaged in what you're suggesting, their emotions will take them in another direction, and they need that emotional energy to get through the pain and fear of changing things. Because change is generally scary, right? Like, pretty much none of us, I would say almost none of us at all, change things that are going well. Like, oh, I'm super happy with my job, but I'm going to quit it anyway and hope to get a better one. Or I'm super in love with my wife or husband, but I'm going to get a divorce and hope to find a better one. That isn't how we think. And so the idea of change is only when things are bad and there's pain, and that's why it's hard. Okay, so that was thing one. You already hit on my second thing, which is pace. And so we're going to get to tonight's second history lesson. I say when you said pace, you waited and didn't change things immediately. With change management, we know there's science and studies that show if you try to change too much too fast, each person has a different comfort with rate of change. But if you're changing things too fast, everyone becomes resistant. And the faster you go, the more people will resist. So you had an intuitive sense of this, but an analogy to think of is, I say, win the war, not all the battles. You care in the end that the change gets done. You don't necessarily care about all the steps along the way. And so if people are really resistant to one part of the change but not the other, let them. If most of the people are willing to try it but one person is resistant, it's okay to hold back, like let that one person go their own way a little bit. And what I mean by win the war, not the battles, George Washington obviously ultimately won the American Revolutionary War. But what a lot of people don't know is George Washington actually lost almost every military engagement he was in until the very end. And the thing he did is it says here, stubborn on the vision, flexible on the details. That's another way to frame this, right? You're stubborn on where you're going, but flexible on how you get there. So, because I love military history stories, George Washington, and they're memorable. You can remember this when you're in a situation. He realized that what was most important was that he keep his army intact. Because as long as he had an army that was a threat to the British, they had to keep fighting. He didn't have to beat the British on any particular day. He knew that they were far from home and it was a long way to England, and supplies were expensive. And if he could just draw the war out and make them keep fighting, he had a chance. So he would fight and start to lose, but he was always good basically at running away. And we don't think of George Washington as like a runaway, like that would be cowardly, but he kept withdrawing. So he always lost, but he never lost his army, and the British could never finish him off. And then at the end, he finally had enough support. He surrounded them and they surrendered. But the point of this is, for your teams, you need to keep your leadership authority and respect for you intact, and you don't need to win every particular point. And so my advice is stick to that idea of pacing. And Switch will say more about that. Okay, now I have 4 things in a row that are all about clarity. Thing number 1 is set your team up with clear reasons. And there's a famous book here. I have read part of it, and I think it's also available. You can, if reading's too slow, I'm almost certain this is available as a TED Talk, and I'm sure chat will tell us. And that is Start With Why. This is a famous book by Simon Sinek, and basically how great leaders inspire everyone to take action. Start with why. You can watch this as a TED Talk and get everything you need out of it quickly. But if you start with why, then people know why you're trying to make the change. So at least they have an idea. And yeah, chat's verifying it is. So I'll get this out from over my face. But start with why. And I probably need to add that to my reading list. Yes, why. Why start with why? So that people know where they're going and that there is a reason. It's not just, oh, I'm the new guy and I'm making changes. Okay, so clear reasons. Second thing, clear standards. So if you're expecting a change and you're trying not to freak people out, but you're expecting a cultural change, you need to lay out what that change looks like. Like, what exactly are you expecting? Try to give a picture of it. If possible, try to set standards. Consider doing something like the Amazon leadership principles that can be written down and people can refer to. And the reason that matters is, to the degree possible, then, you want your change to have clear and objective measurements. So it's not just your opinion of what you want. You have something that you can measure and say, are we doing this new thing or not? And it's not just, oh, Mrugendra doesn't like me or doesn't like us or doesn't agree with our culture. You're looking for that change. You don't want to be seen as capricious. You want to be able to point not to, I don't think you did it, but look, the data in our group doesn't meet the standard we set. So, this collar. Okay. Bad collar. Anyway, lastly, if there are going to be consequences for not doing what you said, you want to be clear about those up front without being threatening. All right, chat's funny this time. 4-year-old me would love that book. Start with why. Why is the sky blue? Why, daddy? Why, daddy? Why, daddy? Yeah, okay, we've all been there. All the parents and many of the older brothers have been there. So that's a type of hell. Maybe this book will get us out of it. Simon Sinek turns out to be the ultimate father. I don't know. But if there are going to be consequences, you want to give clear notice, like, not in a threatening way, but like, this is required, and if it's not done this way, that's a performance problem. You can be clear without being threatening. It's a job requirement. And then the last part, the other side of pace, is consistency and patience. I don't think there's a leader in the world who's ever said, oh, I wanted my team to do something different, and they changed faster than I wanted them to. They adopted my idea faster than that's never going to happen. So remember, you don't, everybody seems skeptical and hesitant to you because you already believe it should be different. And you've probably already seen the difference somewhere else. So, of course, you're like, it's like trying to convince your kids to try a new dish. And they're like, it looks icky. And you're like, but I love tamales or I love, whatever. They've never had it. And so it's foreign and scary. And you are like, oh, these are great. I've had them 10 times. Well, the same thing here. So cultural change is one of the hardest things to do. And that's why there's so many books on it. I've given you my thoughts on it. Questions, things that you're going to try. Talk to me a little bit about what you want to apply.
Right. So I think those are useful points. The other thing which I hear from one of my other advisors on our board is that what he keeps reminding me is that not when you walk into a startup, and he's been in other startups, and what he keeps telling me, which kind of resonates with your last point about the tamales example, is that he keeps telling me that, Mrugendra, you know what good looks like, but when you walk into a startup, a lot of people you are working with often do not know what good looks like. So it's your job to show them what good looks like, and uh, a lot of people will resonate with that good and start rallying around you after a point in time. But there is always going to be initial resistance until they figure out that this is actually good.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's right. Um, you have the advantage of having seen good in action. Uh, you know, Amazon gets a lot of criticism, but you worked at Amazon with me in the past. And, people can say whatever they want about Amazon, but it's clearly one of the most successful companies of the modern age. And so it's doing something really good. Oh, hey, Hephaestus, I didn't see you'd shown up. Welcome in. We were just talking about you actually earlier. You missed the call for Avengers to assemble. You were the missing Avenger. But leaving that aside, you've had the chance to work in a top performing company. Whether or not it was always great, it's well above the average. And now you're going to a company that has where a lot of people haven't seen that, and they've been at whatever they've been at. And particularly, you talked about how a lot of your people also haven't been in product companies. They've been in medicine. And so not only don't they have experience with great product companies, they don't have any experience with product work at all. And that's why I say he's right. Patience and just realizing, I guess I haven't talked about this. When I think about being a leader, and it's why I do the Easy Coach. I think that your number one job becomes teaching. And long before, you can tell Chad, I won't be offended if you say that's a big bunch of shit. He's a liar. But you can reflect on when we worked together. I think I spent a lot of my time then teaching. And that you're now in my role. I'm not lying, right? I taught. Okay, good. We'll check. No, when I throw those out there, I want chat to know that is what I really did. The point is, though, you're now in that role where more of your work is teaching and explaining, and less of your work is doing. And when you worked for me, you were in a role where most of your job was do. Get these people in, get them chairs, get them desks, get them phones, and have them execute a process and ask very few questions, because it was an operational job. I know you went on to do other things in Amazon, but now you're in a role where honestly most of what you're doing is teaching. And so if it were in the US, I'd say buy coffee. Knowing that India also is a big tea culture, it doesn't really matter whether you're buying coffee or tea, But probably a way to be super effective in your job is a lot of coffee and a lot of tea. Um, it's related to another point I believe in, by the way. People are much more receptive to listening in a social situation than in like a meeting or boss situation. So I would do a lot of change management over chai.
Yeah, all my one-on-ones are in a Starbucks.
Perfect. That's a great idea. Although, you know,
There's a new one in. I picked this up in when I was still in Amazon because the Starbucks opened in the mall next door. You're aware of it, so you would know.
yeah, inside the Bangalore bubble. I know exactly what he's talking about. An aside while he laughs for a second, our office in Bangalore was in a little walled city that had a World Trade Center, an apartment building, a shopping mall. My fingers aren't on the screen. A hospital, and the Sheraton. If I didn't say that, and like,
And a school.
oh, and a school. And so you could stay inside this bubble. You could live in it, shop in it, and work in it. Uh, and like it was just a totally, it was like a little slice of first world dropped inside the rest of Bangalore, which varied. Some of Bangalore is very first world, and some of Bangalore was very like cardboard shacks. So anyway, but we called it the bubble. I was taught to call it the bubble. Um, so I think we've covered it. Like those are my advice points.
I had one question.
Yeah, shoot.
Like, is the timeline when you are a startup more shorter when we talk patience and change? Uh, is the timeline more shorter, and does the rope need to be shorter than it is in a larger company? And how do you decide what is the right length of the rope?
Yeah, good question. I mean, in the end, while Bezos would not like to hear this, the answer to that is yes. And the reason is a big company has a little more time, and keeping your talent matters a lot. You have a very realistic choice, which is startups can run out of money much more easily and just die. And so you have a very realistic choice, which is like, well, I'd like to get this person on board, um, but if I take too long and don't implement this and our company goes under, we lose everybody. So maybe I just need to fire them or tell them, like, look, if you can't get in line with this, please quit. And you don't want to be too quick on that trigger because it's destructive. But there is a very realistic, like, and I also think you can get people to understand that. Like, look, I'm pushing you hard and I'm asking you to take an uncomfortable risk with me because we're a startup and we only have so much time to succeed. So I think I think it's totally fair uh, that it is shorter. Now, how you decide how short, that depends on how much money's in the bank, right? Like if no, I mean, but like if the company were really at risk, I would be a total autocrat. I would take the risk of pissing people off, and I would just give orders. You do this or leave. Front door's over there. We can't really spare your salary, and you just and people, by the way, will tolerate that for a very short time if they believe it's a valid emergency. If they don't believe it's an emergency, or then their tolerance changes. Now, I don't get the sense, and you shouldn't say on stream probably, but I don't get the sense that your company is in any immediate threat. So you do have to be a little bit like it's wise to try to bring as many people along. But yeah, moving fast is always good. And when I say Bezos wouldn't like my answer, he would encourage that Amazon should move just as fast as a startup. Like if we need to make a change, make a change. And Andy Jassy in particular, who runs AWS, would be like, do it now. What's wrong with today? What's wrong with tomorrow? And that's how Amazon stays lean. So yeah, I counsel patience, but patience can mean taking people to tea twice a week and giving them 2 weeks, and after 4 meetings and 4 teas, being like, okay, look, I need you to do this. So, all right, Farouk's headed to bed. I know you have to go. You have to go right now, Mrugendra. So thank you for being on. I will wrap up with the stream here. You can go ahead and drop off if you want. We'll see you back in a month. Do your homework, read your books,
Yeah.
and
So
have fun. Exat
Yeah.
Systems. It's not public yet, but like clearly everyone should be lining up for the IPOs someday. That's an important point. All right. See you later.
See you. Bye.
Cheers. Hey, for the rest of everybody in chat, let's have some fun for a minute. So we've done our homework. It's great. I'm gonna take Zoom off the screen here. You're out, Mrugendra. Cheers. I'm gonna hang that up. So here's the fun thing I was thinking about. I was talking to my wife about this. Um, so let's say you could only eat the food of one culture for the rest of your life. You had to pick a single culture and only eat the food from that one country or culture from now on. What would you pick? And the reason I bring it up is I was talking about tamales, and like one of the runners in my discussion with my wife was Mexican. And so I want to see chat. There's a ton of people here. Quentin says Mediterranean. Sound off in chat. What would you, if you had to live on the food of one culture, what's it going to be for you? And Italian, yes. So that's the other contender in my world. We were Italian versus Mexican. Mediterranean is a strong contender. Ethernight, I'm going to disqualify your answer. Asian is too broad. I will accept Chinese, Japanese, or Southeast Asian maybe as a group like Thailand and Thai and Viet together. But I'd love to see Ethernight how you would break down Asian. I'm already eating chicken kebab almost every day. Nice, Festus. I love Mediterranean. All right, there's Devin coming in with Merca. I am shocked. Mediterranean is kicking ass in this analysis. All right, so what are we talking about here? Are we talking about hummus and pita? What are you guys into that you're so into there? Japanese, just give me rice. So while people vote, and I'll sound off here in a minute on my opinion, just clearly our next show is a little bit away. It's almost 2 weeks. It's going to be Tuesday the 17th at 6 p.m. And I'm going to talk about how to be an inventor. So I've got 60 issued patents. That's a lot. Look, it's how to be inventive, how to do it systematically, how to be really good at it. And then in a future show, Devin and I are going to get together and we're going to do personality tests. We're going to go over how it is that the tests that get done in workplaces that give your work style and your work traits, how you can use those to improve your performance. So that's a show we haven't scheduled yet, but he and I are going to do it together. I think I'm going to ask him to come on my show for that, and we'll run it here. He's going to take one of the tests. He's never taken one. And then we're going to go over my test results and his live on stream. So we'll announce that schedule soon. The other thing I'd say to everybody's hanging out, thank you for hanging out. Please share our channel. We grow through you. So without your recommendations and referrals, not everybody who can benefit from the Easy Coach gets the chance to. And I do this with you. I appreciate all the regulars who are here. It's fun to see you in chat. There's a great list here. But I need you to bring other people, to grow our channel and to get the word out to more folks, because I hear from all of you that you love the content. Well, my show is never late. That's right. That's a show that will start on time. Hashtag never late. Chalupa knows Devin well. But Devin's never late. He arrives precisely when he intends to, just like a wizard in Lord of the Rings. And every show he does is also the best show he's ever done. They're incredible. It just keeps getting better. So anyway, we will see you on September 17th at 6 p.m. for how to become an inventor. We'll schedule that later. I have to answer this question, which I love all of you have answered. For me, I would put Mexican and Italian equal on food, like where by food I mean dinner or lunch, where Mexican struggles for me compared to Italian is dessert. I'm a sweet tooth. I love tiramisu. I love some of the other. I love gelato, and I think of those as quintessentially Italian. And then the other place is my wife and I. Oh, hey, Festus, thank you for the tier one sub. That's super generous of you. Everything you do supports Washington Trails Association, but I appreciate the sub very much. You may be one of the first tier one subs in a while, so thank you for that. Are you wearing a wizard hat? You got to sell it. Cannoli, yes, love cannoli. Not as much as tiramisu, but Festus breaking out the shirts now. Uh, I am an introverted troglodyte. The test may or may not reveal that, but that's good. Um, anyway, everybody, for me, the other thing is we love wine. And while I would be fine drinking a lot of tequila drinks in the Mexican tradition, for my wife, going all tequila as a non starter, yeah, you guys can definitely vote on what test we do. I've done most of them, so I was thinking of the DISC test, but, and of course, I know my Myers Briggs type. All right. Thank you, Dorino. Thank you, Firewall. Subscribe tier one. Oh, I forget. Duh. I'm being really bad. I chastised Devin for this in his chat today, and now I'm being hopeless. It is September. So you can sub. You can sub for half price all this month. And the team I used to run at Twitch, the Commerce team, built September. And so subs are half price. And actually, I'll share a fun story of how September came about. And the story behind September is we had never run a price promotion on subs. And I was banging on my team saying, look, price promotions work. Like, we have to find a way to do this. And so the first ever September came about by me basically telling the team, going to the chat we just had with Mrugendra, you have to run a promotion. I don't care how you do it. I don't care what it is. Run some sort of discount. And they came up with, hey, let's run, half price subs. Like, that's a great discount. And the first September is famous in that sense. It worked super well. People loved it. And that's how the name came up, and we got it to be a tradition. But I will share, without going into a bunch of Twitch stuff I don't want to talk about, that like a perennial problem is that the bits and subs original products were built with minimum functionality, and they weren't built to have a lot of price flexibility, and basically with no ability to discount. Thank you, 40 Pink Dragons, for the tier 1 sub. Very much appreciate that. So the result is it was super hard to do much creative with pricing, and I think it's still a challenge. So they're working on improving it, and they're always coming out with new stuff, and I love that team. But the first September was a result of me getting frustrated because we tried and tried and tried. Options change the local currency so we don't have to pay conversion fees. I'll just say common request, Quentin. And I'm not going to go into more of it, but yes, known request. Some product manager did well with this one. Yes, and he's a fan of Easy Coach. The product manager at that time for most of these products, there was actually somebody else. Daniel Yoon was product manager of subs at that time, but the person who's an Easy Coach fan was Bobby Scarnaman. So Twitch Scar was big in early bits and also then for sub gifting. The tank came out. Dorino, that is exactly right. Eventually, the tank came out, and I was, for those of you who don't know the reference to the tank, it's from a book called Dealing with People You Can't Stand. And I have a personality in that book called a tank, where I get frustrated when I ask for things and ask for things and ask for things and they don't happen. And eventually I do become directive. So I know that about myself, and I can at least admit it and warn people like, hey, if we talk about this over and over, eventually I'm going to get sick of hearing excuses. So, Twitch Scar, there we go. Bobby's face from JWP. Tank emote next. Get those sub numbers up. Yeah, we might be eligible. We might have crossed 15 subs. We can add our next emote. I'm kind of bad about checking those things because I don't push subs because I want the stream to be voluntary and free. But I appreciate all the support. Kyle, who's hydrate right now, please. We didn't do a mystery item this week. We don't do those on. There is an item in the back. Let's see. There is some stuff I'll talk about on my next show, and there may be some new stuff on the shelf. But we didn't have an intentional mystery item this week. So we'll do one for our next show on the 17th. I have some in backlog, and that's what we'll do. So, hey, everybody, I need to actually pack for a trip, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for showing up. I love all you regulars. I've called most of you out who show up here. There's about 10 to 12 of you here who are here every show. And having that community, T-Bolt Sniper is one of the people who's here a lot also. Having you here all the time is everything I dreamed of when I started this channel. Having some people who are interested, who comment, who have fun when we talk about what kind of food. Mediterranean took a surprising first place in the poll. I will say that there were only 4 options I saw mentioned. We had Mediterranean, Italian, well, we had Mediterranean, Italian, Mexican, and Asian. Pineapple Shade, acknowledge me, senpai. Well, you gotta speak up more. But you have occasionally, so Pineapple, good to see you. And you do have a Twitch Prime icon badge, so I always appreciate that because that's what I do. So, all right, everyone, I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you very much. See you in just under 2 weeks on the 17th, and we'll be back to shows at that point. We'll get Devin scheduled. Everybody have a great night.